In memory of Diotima, Jeanne de Vietinghoff, to Madame Helene Naville. There are souls who make us believe the soul exists. They are not always the most genial. The most genial are those who can best express themselves. Sometimes they are babbling souls. Often they are silent souls. Jeanne de Vietinghoff, who died recently, left several books. Some of them are very beautiful. La Liberté Intérieure, La Intelligence du Bien, 7th and 8th editions. A Soul d'un Monde Nouveau, 1921, 2nd edition. Sur l'Art de Vie, 1923. Impressions d'âme, 4th edition. L'Autre Devoir, a novel, is a rather more mediocre book. They present, however, only an etiolated image of the woman herself. And even the most beautiful portraits do not replace the dead. The books of Jeanne de Vietinghoff, for those who knew her, give a simple commentary on the poem that was her life. Inspired by reality, they remain inferior to it. They are no more than the ashes of a splendid fire. I should like to enable those who did not know her to feel the intimate warmth of those ashes. I should like to put aside everything that is merely an envelope, an appearance, a surface, in order to go directly to the heart of this rose, to the bottom of this sweet chalice. Let me say simply, for that will explain certain things, that Jeanne de Vietinghoff was born a Protestant. She never broke with that faith, which she accepted from childhood. She was not one of those who break with things easily. Quote, what one believes matters little, end of quote, she said. Quote, what matters is how one believes. We can learn from this exceptional woman how to disengage ourselves from the external forms in which we enclose God. The higher we rise, the more we hold sway over our beliefs. Ultimately, Jeanne de Vietinghoff came more and more to belong to that invisible church without a name or dogmas, in which all sincerities live in communion. For her, truth was not some fixed point, but an ascending line. The truth of today, fashioned out of a renouncement of yesterday's truth, would give way in advance before future truths. Each truth, and she accepted all of them, was for her only a road which ought to lead higher. Quote, what today seems to me the principal thing will tomorrow be only an accessory. My ideal of perfection varies. Sometimes I attribute it to obedience, sometimes to grandeur, sometimes to discipline, sometimes to the sincerity of my life. I ask what is the number and what is the value of the virtues, and yet it is always the same God I obey, with an equally sincere heart, the indefatigable impetus of a soul always en route. This mystical way of life is nothing but a perpetual departure. Everything slips away. The soul assists, motionless at the passing of joys, of sorrows, of deaths, out of which it composes a life. She had been given, quote, the great lesson of things that pass away, end of quote. It took her a long time to recognize within that changing decor the intimate, unwavering line of interior development. She had groped her way through all things. She had made passions her transitory mirror. Men who have wished to embellish the soul have thought they should decorate it with beliefs and principles, the way they adorn the saints in their sanctuaries with precious stones and gold. But the soul is only beautiful when it is naked, end of quote. I'm going to reread that. Men who have wished to embellish the soul have thought they should decorate it with beliefs and principles, the way they adorn the saints in their sanctuaries with precious stones and gold. But the soul is only beautiful when it is naked, end of quote. At moments she manages to perceive herself in her eternal shape. I would suggest to readers of Tagore that they copy these lines of Jeanne de Vietinghoff into the margin of Gitchen Hollow. Quote, everything I see seems to me a reflection, everything I hear a distant echo, and my soul searches for the wondrous source, for it thirsts for pure water. The centuries pass and the world wears away, but my soul is always young. It keeps its vigil among the stars in the night of time. End of quote. Jeanne de Vietinghoff wrote the poem of life of life which does not pass away as those who live do. Madame de Vietinghoff was suspicious of virtues painfully achieved. She wanted them to be spontaneous, happy. Quote, why make a chore of life when one can make a smile of it, end of quote. She wanted her virtues to be natural the way all things are. She understood, better than I can say, the infinite diversity of nature, which leads each soul, each mind, each body down divergent roads to the same goal of happiness. This accessible soul was an accepting soul. Quote, do not judge. Life is a mystery, and each of us obeys different laws. Do you know the power of the things that led them? What sufferings and desires furrowed their road? Have you come upon the voice of their conscience, which reveals to them and whispers the secret of their destiny? Do not judge. Consider the pure lake and tranquil waters at which the 1,000 waves which sweep across the universe finally arrive. Everything you behold must arrive there. All the waves of the ocean are required to bear the ship of truth to port. Believe in the efficacy of the death of all you wish for, in order to take your part in the triumph of what must be, end of quote. Reading these words, one cannot doubt that Jeanne de Vietinghoff had a heart of genius. For the wise man, grief is not a redemption, but an evolution. Quote, one has to have exhausted one's grief before one can reach that tranquil hour which precedes the new dawn, end of quote. In her life, which was not without shadows but was always without blemish, Jeanne de Vietinghoff unfailingly kept herself at the level of happiness. To renounce happiness or to discourage others from it was to her an inexcusable fault. No doubt, quote, whenever it encounters a being of goodwill, life undertakes, by causing him to experience the insufficiency of what is mediocre, to elevate his idea of happiness, end of quote. Suffering, like joy, was for her a passerby who finally spoke of other things. Yet it is imprudent to disdain too quickly. The soul who is mistress of herself rejects no pleasure, even those considered vulgar. She tastes it, possesses it, and one day goes beyond it. Quote, sometimes I think that if death were to come to me unexpectedly before I had soaked myself completely in the river of life, I would say to him, go away, the hour has not yet struck. The repose of thy great blue heaven would crush me if I still possessed so much as one strength I had not yet spent, and thy eternal felicity would be mingled with regret if there were one flower left on earth whose perfume I had not smelled. End of quote. Here in this ardor and in this detachment, I also hear the pulsing fever of the young André Gide. When Diotima undertook to explain God to the banqueters of the symposium, she condemned no form of human passion, but endeavored merely to attach it to the infinite. It did not bother her to see the guests at that banquet tarrying on the earthly roadway. If necessary, she could have traveled it herself. Quote, the greatest earthly happiness leads only to the border of heaven, end of quote. She knows that life, or perhaps death, will always lead us to our goal in the end, and that goal is God. Quote, it is we who are not ready. The objects of our contentment have been there for days, for years, possibly for centuries. They wait for the light to enter our eyes so that we may see them, and for the strength to come into our arms that we may seize them. They await, puzzled to be there such a long time useless. We suffer, she also said, we suffer each time we doubt someone or something. But our suffering is transformed into joy the moment we have embraced in that person or in that thing the immortal beauty which caused us to love them. End of quote. No doubt, blindness, far from increasing our ability to love, narrows the space in which our love has free play. Perhaps Plato spoke the truth and Jeanne de Vietinghoff was right. Lives may be beautiful because of different qualities, through their surrender, through their steadfastness. There are melodic lives just as there are sculptural lives. Only music, a Bach fugue or a Mozart sonata, seems to me to express so much fervor, serenity, and ease. Quote, not what is seen or said or thought, but the unrelenting union which unites, beyond all sentient things, my joy with yours and whatever is inexpressible in our souls. Not vows or kisses or caresses, but the rhythmic harmony in universal growth, end of quote. Her penultimate book, which was perhaps inspired by Count Kaiserling, brings a generous audacity to the study of the problems of the years after the war. Jeanne de Vietinghoff offers the world the method of salvation she proposed for individual souls, a perpetual transmutation of values, not abrupt but progressive. Quote, be patient while you wait, for fear lest you seize upon a transitory form. Have you then so little faith that you cannot live 1 hour without religion, without morality, without philosophy? End of quote. In 1925, Madame de Vietinghoff did not despair of our crepuscular Europe. The coming generation seemed to her to bear within it the triumph of human strength, that is, I believe, of sincerity. These excessive hopes seemed to me like some form of maternal love. Jeanne de Vietinghoff believed in youth and in the future of the world because she had 2 sons. It is doubtless that which moves me so much in this beautiful book. I like the loving woman in her even more than the Sibyl. She always doubted that man would have to answer for what are called his sins. She thought they were like those shards of marble which accumulate around an unfinished masterpiece in the sculptor's studio. Inevitable debris. Continuing the same line of thought, we may suppose that she might have believed our virtues are not meritorious. That would have been on her part evidence of humility. In the last years of her life, looking at her weary but discouraged hands, Madame de Vietinghoff was gently surprised at the courage their gestures indicated. She thought she had lived her life as an irresponsible spectator, merely consenting. In the end, she came to prefer above everything the simplicity of empty hands. She too appears to have stripped herself in order to sleep. Quote, O God, I would that each morning as I look up to thee, I might offer thee my empty hands. I would rather than make an effort be nothing more than a receptacle of the wave of infinitude and travel down roads by chance, urged on only by the breath of inner voices. I would forget my wisdom and my reasons, ask nothing more, cease all desiring, and accept with a smile the roses thy hand lets fall in my lap. Odors of things we have not acquired, sweetness of undeserved happiness, beauty of truths our thought has not created. End of quote. I have neglected to say how beautiful she herself was. She was still almost young when she died, before the trials of old age came, which she did not fear. Much more than her writing, it is her life which gives me the impression of perfection. For there is something much rarer than competence, talent, or even genius, and that is nobility of soul. Had Jeanne de Vietinghoff written nothing, her character would be no less lofty. Only, many of us would never have known it. It is the way of the world that the rarest virtues of a person always remain the secret of someone else. Thus did this Platonic life unfold. Jeanne de Vietinghoff unceasingly evolved from everyday wisdom to a higher wisdom, from the indulgence that excuses to the indulgence that understands, from a love of life to that love utterly disinterested which life inspired in her, and, as she herself put it, quote, from the loving God of little children to the infinite deity of the sage. End of quote. Perhaps those theosophical dreams, like strange but amicable visions, which one sees when one closes one's eyes to sleep, also came to console her at the approach of evening. Life on earth, which she loved so much, was for her only the visible side of life eternal. No doubt she accepted death as a night darker than the others, but one which would be followed by a more shining dawn. One would like to believe she was not mistaken. One would like to believe that the dissolution in the tomb did not arrest such a rare development. One would like to believe that death for such souls is merely one further step. Note, from a literary point of view, we should remember that the Baronne de Vietinghoff, Dutch by birth, belonged by her marriage to that Baltic family from which came Barbe Julie de Vietinghoff, the Baron de Krudner, and the mythical counselor of Tsar Alexander. These 2 foreigners spoke in French. Also, Baron de Vietinghoff has told me that Au sol d'un monde nouveau was in no way inspired by the German philosopher Kaiserling. I use this note to make this small correction.